Hello and welcome to another macro video. This is the second video that sprang out of the live streaming that I did the other day, which didn't work wonderfully well, but anyway. The streaming had one question that I answered, or at least started to answer, in Macro Q&A 1, and while I was doing it I thought that really there's more that could be said, and so this is a bit further on. I've given it the rather high-flown title of Computer Aided Editing towards a Conceptual Approach. So I was trying to see how we could deal with the idea of using computer programs for editing at a more conceptual level. And if I disappear, I'm sure you won't mind. Anyway, where were we? Yes. So the question that we asked, that was asked of me, was what macros should I be using when doing editing, and I think the way that I started to answer that question was more along the lines of, here are some macros that you can use for different tasks. So what I was doing was giving a task-driven way of looking at it rather than a system-oriented one. So what I thought was I really needed a conceptual framework that would allow us to talk about what we're trying to achieve, and therefore how we can use computer tools to help us with what we're trying to do. So I have actually used the term towards a conceptual approach because these are really just my first thoughts. I'm not making any claims to this being any kind of definitive statement about using computer tools for editing. It's just some thoughts to help you to think through what you do, and in doing so actually it also helps me in thinking how I work, but we'll see how we get on. So a systems approach would start from the point of view of saying what are we trying to achieve, and then how can computer apps help. I've used the term apps there because the person who asked the question was referring to macros and then was referring to Perfectit, but Perfectit is not a macro as such. It's a computer tool, but it's written in a more powerful language than I can handle. I can only handle Visual Basic, and Daniel and his team are what I would call proper programmers who can use other languages to produce these impressive packages. So let's just use the general term computer apps or computer tools. So what we're not saying, and what I have said really, is that there are things that I do as an editor. How can I use apps to help the things I already do? And the reason I put it that way is because we're trying to work as a team. That's how I've thought of it. There's you and there's the computer, and you each have strengths and weaknesses. Both of you have strengths and weaknesses, and so what we're trying to do is to ask, is there a better way of working that will play to the computer strengths and to your strengths, and thereby to do a better job, a more consistent end product, and to be able to do it more quickly, and therefore you can earn at a higher rate. But the important thing is that you must be willing to, well, I think so anyway, you must be willing to work differently and not just say this is how I've always done it and this is what I'm going to do. So what are the strengths? If we think of the computer, then it's tireless. You can set it going with a task and it will keep going and it won't get tired, it won't fall asleep. It's entirely consistent. If you give it a job to do, it will do it to the bitter end, and it will not make, quotes, mistakes, unquotes. It will do exactly what you tell it to do. Of course, you have to be careful what you tell it to do, because that might have implications that you hadn't thought of, but it is consistent given the program, whether it's Visual Basic or Perfectit. It will do what the programmer has asked it to do and what you have asked the program to do. But it is stupid. Well, and say it's fast. what does it understand? Well, it thinks in terms of, well, it doesn't think, but it works in terms of words and sentences and characters and punctuation. But these are just bits of data that it shunts around. It has no idea whatsoever of meaning or significance or attitude or feelings. Those are entirely human things. Well, I suppose maybe as artificial intelligence increases, maybe there would be, we could say there was something along those lines, but that certainly leaves me out. I can only deal with simple, straightforward Visual Basic macros. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the human that has to provide the meaning and the significance and all the rest, and the computer can do the sort of mechanical stuff. But I repeat, in order to get the best out of the two of us, the team, me and the computer, I've got to be willing to work differently. Okay, so let's think of it in terms of what is the editor's primary aim. What is the editor trying to do? Well, I want to suggest that the aim is to aid the communication between the author, or authors I suppose, and the readers. Now we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so we are talking about words and pictures, but as far as I'm concerned, the pictures are a separate issue, and I can't provide anything that will help there in dealing with the picture side of things. Okay, so I'm talking about communication through words. Now, what does the computer do in terms of communication through words? What does it understand? Well, the computer understands documents, it understands paragraphs, sentences, words, characters, and that's the structure that is used by Visual Basic. This is the sort of language in which it talks. It talks about, you can say, for each sentence in the document, look at the first character of each sentence and do something with it, and do something with the first word in the sentence, make it highlighted. But that's the only level at which Visual Basic can work. But these words and sentences that it deals with are not communication. They can't communicate. Only humans can communicate. So that's your strength in the team, is that you're the communicator. You're the one who can shape the communication. So that's what I'm asking, is what is the central core of what we do? What is our strength? And I find it's the enjoyable bit. It's the communication. It's the meaning and flow of sentences, and that I find absolutely fascinating. I love it. That's one of the reasons I enjoy my work so much, is dealing with the sentences and trying to make them communicate more effectively, get the author's ideas across to the reader. And that's what I enjoy, and so that's what I want to concentrate on. And it's made up of words and detailed punctuation, but it's only because it's the significance in those words and punctuation that we can shape them in such a way that it improves the communication. So only human editors can do that, and we are not redundant. Don't worry, we are not going to be done out of a job by computers. And in handling those words and punctuation, line editing macros can help you, because they can do if you like, the mechanics of fiddling around with the words and the punctuation, moving them around, switching the order of words, or adding commas or hyphenating things, whatever. If you use line editing macros for that, then that enables you to keep your focus on the meaning and flow of sentences, rather than on changing the spelling or hyphenating or all these little jobs. And if the line editing macros do the work, like changing was to were or is to are or whatever, then it doesn't make spelling errors as it's typing in the new word. So okay, we can go the other way around and saying what hinders the communication between the author and the readers. Well, inconsistencies are one of the main things, I suppose, that hinder the communication. They can cause misunderstanding if things are inconsistent. Obviously, the sentences themselves, the order of the words, the grammar, and those sorts of things. But those are the things that we as human beings deal with. Inconsistencies are something that hopefully the computer can help us with. So what sort of inconsistencies? Well, there are myriad types of inconsistencies. There's just a few there they're suggesting. But I think of these as the mechanics of the document, and that is what I'm hoping that the computer is going to be able to help us with. And that contrasts with the meaning, and it's us humans who are, I say, concentrating on the meaning as much as we can and not having to be distracted by the mechanics. So let's now try to look at the flow of what's happening when we're doing a job. What do we actually do during the course of our work? Well, you could say the first thing is that we've got to clear the mechanical problems out of the way, and then we can concentrate on the meaning. That's what I want to do. I want to get rid of the mechanical problems so that I can concentrate on the meaning, not be distracted, and thereby do a better job for my client. But it's more than that. Clearing the mechanical problems has many levels. So the first one I'm trying to suggest is that we've got to gain an overview of the document. So what inconsistencies are there in the document as it comes to us, and therefore if we look at those, we can make style decisions as to how we're going to change the document, what consistencies are we going to use given the what's presented to us, and obviously taking into account things like the brief if we've got one, but mainly looking at what the author has done and trying not to fiddle around too much with what the author's done. So if the author's got consistencies, then and we can keep those, then that's fine. Where there are inconsistencies, obviously we've got to decide what the consistent way of doing something is going to be. So on the basis of those style decisions, then we can clear the mechanical problems, then we can concentrate on the meaning. And we might also add to that, I'll come back to that in a minute. So how can computer tools help us with those stages? To gain an overview of the document, to find out what the inconsistencies are, then I've produced quite a number of analysis macros, allies, hyphen-alize, proper noun alize, and so on, which we dealt with to an extent in the previous session on Q&A. And then we make the style decisions and we put it on a style sheet. Clearing the mechanical problems, well, there are various apps that we can use for that, and we'll have a look at those in a minute. Then we concentrate on the meaning, and I'm suggesting there that the line editing macros are going to be really helpful. And here's where I was going to say, well, okay, yes, but we can also add to that we might want to double check the mechanics once we've read through the whole book or whatever the document is, and we get to the end. Then we might want to double check to see whether it is now fully consistent as far as we can tell, and we haven't missed things or got things wrong. So really what I'm suggesting here is only a few thoughts about the concepts, and I'm saying that this analysis of how we work and how computer tools can help us to work could easily be the basis of an editing MA or maybe even a PhD. That's obviously not going to be me. I've got work to do, and my main contribution is to provide the tools, to provide macros that editors can use. So I hope might seed some thoughts somewhere that somebody who's doing an editing degree might want to take some of these ideas further and ask the questions, analyze what editors are doing, and see if they can provide some more helpful concepts than I've produced just in this quick thought. But before I finish, I've got 3 models of how the team might work together, and this is based on things that people said. We've had a discussion on the SFP forum, and I've talked to various people about it. So this is based on what I know that people do, obviously including myself, what I do. So I've thought of it here as 4 stages there. Setting up the style, which obviously involves checking inconsistencies, changing the mechanics, dealing with the meaning, and then checking that we've got it right. And so my first model, if you like, is to use my align macros to help with finding the style. Then perfect it can be used to go through the whole document, looking at all the mechanical problems in context. I don't use perfected, I should hasten to add, and therefore that's something which others of you will, be able to comment on. I can just I know that you can do the mechanics by using perfected, and I know that as you do it, you can see what's going on in context. So it offers you, do you want to change this, and you can look at the context. Then, as I've said, we're dealing with the meaning, line editing macros, and then for a final check you can run perfected again, which again I know some of you out there do, and that's a good way of working. The next suggestion is that that some of you use, I know, is the style and the meaning are both done the same way with the align macros and line editing macros, but doing the mechanics can be done globally by using things like threadit and other global change macros. So those are going to be changing the document as a whole, and you don't see it in context. So in other words, these have to be used with great care, and you most certainly shouldn't be doing that sort of thing after you've done the editing, after you've done the line editing with it and looking at the meaning. So these are changes that you're going to make globally before you start, because you can do it rapidly by using these global tools, but that has to be done as a separate task before you do the line editing. Okay, the way I work is with the book, certainly, is to do it chapter by chapter. So I will run threadit and various other macros, making global changes to the first chapter. Then I will line edit the first chapter, and then I can see if my global editing has got errors in it. It's doing things it shouldn't. It's finding false positives. So then I can refine the global editing and make it quicker and more effective, and add things to it, because having read chapter 1 I can see other things that I could add to the global changes, and thereby speed the whole thing up even more. And then when I've done that, I could use perfected as the backstop, the final check, to make sure that I think is actually quite a good way of doing it. That's my own personal view, because if you like, doing things globally, okay, gets the speed, and it's one way of doing it. Then using perfected, it's like giving another view of the document. It's like somebody else looking at the document and trying to spot things. Anyway, for what it's worth, that's a model that you could choose to use. And then finally, this is the model that I use, which is use the align macros first and last, and then various global macros for the mechanics, and do the line editing for the meaning. Okay, so that's something to help you think about. So just in preparing this, I realised just how much we're expected to do as editors. There's a huge amount that you get a book, and there's so much that needs dealing with it. it's not surprising that when we're ending up as a chartered association, because this really is, this is a big professional job that we're doing. We're dealing with so many different things. As just a few there, things that what our job also includes, just to again to stimulate your thinking. So that's it for now, and I hope you found this helpful. Bye for now.